So I just had something very odd happen to me. I'm on my way to do some review cutting. I have a little bit of free time this Saturday evening. And the pool noodle I've been using for mini reviews is on its last legs. So I decided I'd stop by Dollar Tree to buy another pool noodle because I need it for my test cutting. And I get out and I put it in the back of my truck because then I was gonna run over to the other little store here and pick up some groceries. And when I come back, I see a homeless guy running away with my pool noodle. Why? So now I gotta go and buy another pool noodle from the $1.25 tree. Alright, so here I am with my new pool noodle. Just like with the other one, I just threw it back here because I didn't want to unlock my truck just for a pool noodle. Call me lazy, but I also didn't expect anyone to just steal a pool noodle out of the back of my truck. Like, got water back here, got a ton of rocks because geology. I even have a tent over there. Some antlers. But no, I guess this guy just really wanted my pool noodle. So that's what I get for thinking it'd be safe. Throw it inside the truck now. Alright, let's go do some review cutting. Hey guys, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. What are we talking about today, for those of you who didn't read the title? We're talking about review cutting. So, a while ago, like, a year ago at this point, almost, I made a video about why I do review cutting, but today I kind of want to talk about what my review cutting demonstrates. So before we get into all of that, I do want to say, there are issues and inconsistencies with review cutting. We'll get into some of that here in a little bit, but Canadian Cutting Edge has a great video about why he doesn't do review cutting. He makes some really good points in there, and I agree with basically everything he says. There are definitely things to take into consideration. So many things impact the way a knife cuts. The edge geometry, the way it's sharpened, the spine thickness, the ergonomics, the person using it. Someone who is very familiar with and skilled with knives could take a knife that has crappy geometry and make it cut amazing. Someone who's not so skilled could take a great knife and make it cut really, really crappily. So these are, things to consider. There are inconsistencies. I'm inconsistent, but I still do review cutting, and because I think it's important. So let's go ahead and talk about what you should get out of my review cutting. So one thing that we'll notice is that I always use the same mediums in all my review cutting because there's certain things I just want to demonstrate. Cardboard, a very, very common medium. Why do I use it? Because I think a lot of people cut cardboard. And because cardboard is actually a fairly resistant material. And if you're cutting a lot of cardboard, you know that it can be damaging to your knife's edge. So, I use cardboard because it's a common medium. The other thing too is I feel like cardboard demonstrates very, very well the cutting potential of knives. It's very easy to see sliciness in cardboard as opposed to paper or things like that. So, I've got this little thing of cardboard here. Let's go ahead and tilt down. You guys like the new setting? Maybe, maybe not. So, I don't always use the same cardboard in my cutting, and that's always kind of that's one of those things that you can consider to be tilt up just a little bit. One of the things you can consider to be an inconsistency. It absolutely is. But I think cardboard demonstrates very, very well how a knife will pass through a material. Got this little CVV elementum. If you don't start in the choil, gosh, You don't start in the choil, you know, it cuts good. It's kind of dramatic, you know. It's a very, very real thing to see. And for me, it tells me a lot because, you know, I can feel the way the knife goes through the cardboard. And I think that in my reviews it's important, instead of me just saying, oh yes, this knife slices very, very well, to give you guys a physical representation of that. Because when I sliced that cardboard, you couldn't feel how good that felt. I felt it, but you can't because you're watching a video. However, you were able to see, and that gives you a little bit more information to build off of, if that makes any sense. Now, something I want to talk about is behind the edge readings, because a lot of people put a lot of stock into that, and I used to be one of those people. And recently, I've just kind of realized that behind the edge thickness is not the most important thing. It's how well the grind is done, how precisely sharpened or ground that knife is. Well, we'll talk about grinds, because sharpening and grinds are actually very, very different. But here we have this 80-10, very thick behind the edge, pretty thick blade stock too. And it slices, honestly, that felt as good as the Elementum. And you can see that it's very, very clean. Just like the, there's the Elementum's cut. There's the 80-15's cut, or 80-10's cut. Why does it do that? Because the geometry on the 80-10 is done very, very well. It's thick, it's robust for sure, but it's done well. The grinds are even, it comes down to a good edge. You know? Both these knives, I would say, are about equally as sharp, but they're both ground pretty well. The 80-10 is actually ground a little bit better than the Elementum. The Elementum kind of cheats because it has thin blade stock. It's got this hollow grind. And so even if the edge bevel is not as even as the 80-10, or if there's a little bit of a error in the grind itself, it'll still cut just because the blade is so thin. So, you know, definitely things to consider. Let's talk about some of my other mediums. The next test I usually do is the rope pull. This is a pretty interesting test because it can have very different results. And this is kind of you'll notice that some blade shapes do this test better than others. Like blade shapes that have, you know, an extreme curve, the rope tends to just slide off. You know, I've gotten good enough that, you know, I mean, this knife would do good anyways, but, you know, I can kind of overcome that. So this test in a lot of ways kind of tests the, kind of tests the apex of that edge. Let's talk about sharpening. So, this Devo Stout has a very beautiful, high polished edge. This Gerber Swagger has an extremely crap edge. They're going to cut differently because they're sharpened very, very differently. Beautiful. So, could I make this knife do that test better by resharpening it? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's not the factory edge on this knife. I didn't put this edge on it, but it's not the factory edge. Again, an inconsistency. But I still do this test because in a lot of cases, if a knife like this is this bad out of the box, which this one is right out of the box, and it's that terrible, I won't touch up the edge or anything. I'll do this test to show you guys just how crappy the performance is when you first get this knife. There's certain knives where they come to me and they're dull, but the geometry is such that I know it'll cut better if I sharpen it. So I might sharpen it up before I do these tests to show you what it's like. So, let's move on to the next test. The next test I typically do is the rope push tilt down here. That's where I just take the piece of rope we just cut, and I push down with just one push. Let's actually do it like this. Just one push, and I see really how far it goes. And I do 3, just to kind of do an average. Yes, like, see, that one was perfect, and then the rope is in pieces now, but I'll do 3. This is a test that kind of shows the, it's kind of a testament to the strength of the edge, because knives that have a super thin edge do not do well at this test at all. They just kind of mush the rope rather than cut directly through it. Those knives that have a very, very thin edge will do excellently on our next test, but not very well on the rope test, because the rope offers enough resistance. So if you're someone who's wanting to use your knife to cut not just rope, but like even plastics or things that offer a lot of resistance, this is a test that kind of shows what that knife will do. Typically, knives that are very thick behind the edge just crunch that rope very, very well. And again, I do this test to show that all geometries are good at something. Some are better than others in one task, and some will fail every other challenge, but they'll be all right at one challenge. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the aforementioned pool noodle. So here we have my, getting my cord tangled everywhere. We're going to do a little bit of a switcheroo. Wasn't that fun? Okay, so here we have my unstolen pool noodle. That's still just, why? I come out Dollar Tree with my pool noodle, toss it in the back of my truck, like literally just walk by my truck, toss this in the back, and go straight into the market, the little grocery store, to buy some groceries. In there for 15, 20 minutes, come out, and there's this crackhead running away with my pool noodle. I mean, nothing is safe. New Mexico crackheads. So anyways, the pool noodle I think is a very, very interesting medium, because for me, when I'm cutting in the pool noodle, I can feel exactly how well that knife was ground. Not sharpened necessarily, but ground from the factory, because you can have an uneven grind. You can have a knife that is ground a little bit wonky on either side, and sharpening can help offset that, but it will never completely fix just bad factory work, right? So let's go ahead and tilt down here. Let's kind of show what I mean. Okay, so let's look at this. We were able to get that pool noodle thin because the blade stock is thin. Cool, right? But look at this. Put that there. And this is something that I can feel better than you guys can see, but see how wavy that is? See that there's a little bit of jaggedness there on the edges? Not really a clean cut. And it felt a lot worse for me using it than it looks, but let's compare it again against this knife. So we cannot go as thin because the blade stock is just way too thick. But let's see how thin we can go. And it blew away. Be right back. Alrighty, we're back. So I was actually able to go pretty thin. Not quite as thin as that one, but I was able to go pretty thin. A little bit thinner than I thought. You can see here, it's a little bit thicker on this side because that's when, as the blades start getting down up towards the thickness of the spine, it started to wedge it a little bit. So, thick spine problems. But I want you to notice that other than that little wave where we caught up to the full thickness of the spine, there's no jaggedness. There's no real, it didn't catch, didn't bind. It made it through very, very well because the grind is done very well. So there's a lot of things with doing my knife cutting that is admittedly inconsistent. But I don't do it for the consistency. I'm not directly testing these knives. I do my review cutting to show you guys what the knife is capable of. I do the review cutting as literally just physical demonstrations of what I think. Because, let's be honest, reviews will sometimes get boring if I just stay at the table all the time. I like to come out here and do something different, give you guys a change of scenery. So I want to close off this video by talking briefly about some of the things I've learned in the almost 2 years I've been doing the channel, and all the review cutting I've done. One thing that I used to be just a nut about behind the edge thickness, and I've kind of come to realize that that's not the end all be all. For example, this Civivi Elementum with its hollow grind is thinner behind the edge than this Artisan Ahab. However, this is the better slicer. Why? Because a full flat grind on a broad blade like this is just fantastic. Because as you're moving through material, especially cardboard, it's just so consistent and so... It's like, if you think about it like this, you're passing the material, and with this full flat grind, the material is kind of going evenly along the blade as it's going out. If you think about a hollow grind on a knife like this, it goes, and then you kind of get stuck up here at the spine. And it's not something where it's like, oh no, I cannot complete this task. No, I mean, I've used the Civivi Elementum to break down cardboard and stuff, and it works. This one's just a little bit better, and my pool noodle's gone. I hope no homeless crackheads are around to steal it. That's something to take into account. The other thing is, you can make a terrible knife cut like a great knife. You can sharpen it. I mean, this Gerber does not cut well because, look at that. Look at that wonky edge. It's just... bleh. But I could make it cut well. I could sharpen this edge down. Heck, we could go 15 degrees per side, and it has thin enough blade stock where I could cheese it to where this knife just passes through material so well. It's also possible to make a knife that's great, cut terribly. It really does come down to a little bit of the user error. However, right out of the box, why does this big chunky knife cut better than this small, slimmer EDC knife? Because this one was made with care and precision, and this one was ground by a blind monkey. Those are a lot of things you have to take into consideration. This knife slices very, very well. It cuts amazingly well. It doesn't slice as good as take it out of its little bag. It does not slice as good as the Ahab, but it slices very, very well. As we demonstrated earlier, I actually think it slices about as good as the Elementum. If we were going through longer things of cardboard, this might start get hung up on the thickness, but you'd still be able to do it. So, yeah. When I do my review cutting, it's to demonstrate to you guys kind of what I think of the knife. If a knife cuts like crap, if I have not enjoyed using the knife, you will see that in the cutting. If it cuts great, you will see that in the cutting. Like this knife here, I haven't done the review cutting for it yet, but I've been EDCing it every once in a while. And yeah, it does not cut that great. It does not. And so when I do the review cutting, I'm not going to try to make it cut great. I'm not going to resharpen it. I'm not going to do anything because not only does it not cut great, but the knife just has so many other issues that it's not worth fixing. And besides, even if I were to fix it by putting a super low angle on there, it can only do so much. It'll cut a lot better, but I mean, there's just so many other factors that, you know, why would I bother? Why would I tell you guys to bother? So, you know, there we go. Anyways, I think that's about all I had to say today. Just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about review cutting, why I do it, and I guess the too long didn't read, too long didn't watch, TLDW, is I do review cutting to show you guys. I do it to show you guys what the knife is capable of, right? So, let's get a better knife out here. I've been Gideon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Adios.